So today our topic we are having that is cell wall. What is cell wall? What is cell? Cell is, as you guys all know, the basic unit of our life. What is wall? Wall is, as you guys all know, the covering, which means that we are having the cell, and the outer covering of the cell is called cell wall. So many cells is basically having the exterior membrane, which is called the cell wall. Cell wall is basically non-living. It is permeable, which means the exchangement of material can be dead. Okay, what is cell wall? Cell wall, as you guys all know, the outer covering of the cell, and that is basically hydrophilic, which means that is water loving. Hydrophilic. Okay, so the cell wall is basically present in the plant cells or prokaryotes like bacteria, cyanobacteria, that is present in that, fungi. But if we talk about the main point we are having, that is it is absent in the animal cell. Why? Because due to the locomotory mode of this life, which means that our cell wall is basically cell, you can say that our animals we talk about, so we are having the locomotory mode, which means moving mode, but they are basically rigid in nature, and this is present where there is no locomotory mode. Okay, so likewise you can say that the bacteria, cyanobacteria, plants, fungi, they are having the cell wall, but if you talk about the animal cell, that is not present in the animal cell. So if you talk about the composition, so if you talk about the prokaryote, that is bacteria and cyanobacteria, their cell wall is basically made up of the peptidoglycan, which is the combination of the amino acid and the carbohydrate. This is made up of the peptidoglycan. If we talk about the cell wall of the, or you can say that the fungi, so that fungi we are having, that is their cell wall is basically made up of the chitin is basically a polysaccharide. Okay, their cell wall is made up of the chitin. As you guys all know, we have discussed the chitin in very detail in the biomolecules chapter. So here we will discuss only about the plant cell wall. Okay, so the cell wall is basically having the porous structure, which means the plasmodesmata, through where the exchangement of material can be done, which is porous, which means the holes like structure, or you can say the plasmodesmata. Okay, through which the water and dissolved material can allow freely. Okay, so the plant cell wall is basically, today we are discussing about the plant cell wall. So the plant cell wall is basically having the three layers. First one we are having, that is the primary cell wall. Second, secondary. And third, which is middle lamella. Let me make this structure, then I'll be telling you the composition and these all, how these are made up of, the things which is related function. So this is basically the two cells or many cells. Okay, so the two cells which are joined together by a layer that is called the middle lamella, and the outer covering, the thickest covering, that is what, this is the cell membrane. This is the middle lamella which is joining two cells. This is the thickest layer outside of the cell membrane. This is the secondary wall, and after the outermost, that is the primary. Okay, first that is middle lamella, then primary, then secondary, then we are having the cell wall. So first of all, we will discuss about the primary, then secondary, and then middle lamella. Let's move toward the primary cell wall. So primary cell wall is basically present in which is we are having the newly like growing cells. They are basically present in the we are having primary cell wall. On that time we are having no secondary cell wall. After the maturing, when the cell develops, then we are having the secondary cell wall. So this is the cell, and we are having the primary cell wall, as you guys all know, and here we are having the secondary, which is basically developed in the maturing of the cells. Here we are having the just the primary cell wall, which is basically developed in the newly grow cell, which is, for example, the new cell division is occurring. So that is what. So basically the plant cell wall is basically like slightly flexible. This is very thin and flexible, which means movable. Here we are discussing about the primary cell wall, which is thin and movable or flexible. Okay, so the primary cell wall is basically composed of cellulose what? Microfibrils, which means that what is microfibrils? Microfibrils means this is basically the chain of cellulose is called the microfibrils. Okay, so we are, as you guys all know, this is the primary cell wall, and we are having the matrix too. What is matrix? Matrix is basically the fluid. Matrix is basically the fluid. For example, this is the fluid. This is the fluid of this layer, primary. So this fluid is basically made up of this primary cell wall. If you talk about the fluid of that cell wall, so that is basically made up of other polysaccharide, for example hemicellulose, okay, pectin. Okay, so pectin is what? Pectin is basically a polymer, okay, and we are having that is cellulose. So here we are having the as you guys all know, this is the, and we are having, this is like the cellulose, microfibril cellulose crisscross section. This is showing what? This is the crisscross section, which means that this is basically provide the strength, that microfibrils provide the strength to the cell wall, this primary cell wall. Okay, which cell wall? Primary. So here you can see that this is the matrix and this is the cellulose. So matrix is composed of hemicellulose, pectin and cellulose. Hemicellulose is about 50% and these both are about 25%. Okay, these microfibrils are showing what? Cross-crest arrangement. Okay, so this cross-crest arrangement or the cellulose is basically that can stress too. It is basically the plastically flexible. Okay, so this was about the primary cell wall. Now let's move toward the secondary cell wall. Secondary cell wall. Secondary cell wall is basically, as you guys all know, developed when the cell is basically matured. This is flexible when the secondary cell wall is like developing. So this is basically that can stretch, and this is you can see that providing, this is basically become a longer when the secondary cell wall is developed. This is basically thick cell wall, okay, and this is between the, you can say that, the cell wall and the primary cell wall. Now this is basically the cell wall which is present in only the sclerenchyma cells. What is sclerenchyma cell? These are basically the dead cells. These are the dead cells. So the secondary cell wall basically provides a strength to the dead cells. That's why we are having the secondary cell wall. So it is basically thick and this is rigid too. Okay, it does not basically allow the further growth of the cell. Okay, so the secondary cell wall is basically consist of the cellulose, hemicellulose and lignin. What is lignin? You will say that what is the difference between then the primary and this one? The difference is basically we are having here the pectin and here we are having the lignin. Lignin is basically a compound. This is what? This is a compound which is basically providing the strength to the secondary cell wall. Okay, so the secondary cell wall basically provide the definite shape, the mechanical support. Okay, so that was the function of the secondary cell wall and the composition. Now we are having the last, we are having that is middle lamella. As you guys all know, in the introduction I told you guys that middle lamella is basically a cell wall which is basically joining the two cell wall, which is providing the which is joining the two cell wall. So this is what, this is the middle lamella. Okay, so this is basically present between the primary cell wall. Okay, so this wall basically hold the cells together, and this is basically composed of the sticky like gel like substance which is magnesium. This is made up of the magnesium and calcium salts, and one more compound, that is pectin. That is the pectin. So this middle lamella is basically composed of the magnesium, calcium salts and pectin. Here this secondary cell wall is also made up of some kind of inorganic salts too. Inorganic salts too, like waxes, that is the lipid, inorganic salts. Okay, so this was the detailed lecture of the cell wall. In the next video, we will discuss about the plasma membrane, the function, the structure, the composition, everything.